false flag operations in recent days and indeed recent hours.
Don't forget, the Ukrainians have had 10,000 people killed since the invasion of the Donbass. 10,000 people, often weekly or every month, on that line of control. Young men and women who are simply guarding their border. The false flag operations have been growing. I think there is a worrying trend that what we've seen recently fits the bill or the playbook of what we can expect as the Russian government potentially seeks to destabilise and confuse the picture. We're not confused. We know what 160,000 troops mean, and so does the international community.
Rachel Maskell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Maintaining a diplomatic focus is absolutely crucial at this time, but could the government say what diplomatic focus they're bringing to Russian allies across the world? I haven't heard the Defence Secretary talk about that.
Well, the marked difference between Russia is they don't have any allies. Belarus is their only ally. By your friends you shall be judged. Belarus is it. That's one of the problems for Russia. It fails to recognise that international alliances are a sign of both civilised society and human rights. If you want to be on your own and stuff everyone else, you end up like North Korea. We would try and use our allies. We are certainly trying people who have more influence than others, but fundamentally it's going to be in the mind of President Putin what he does next.
Andrew Bridgen.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. To what extent does my right honourable friend believe the undignified withdrawal from Afghanistan by ourselves and our allies has emboldened President Putin and contributed to setting in train events that are now unfolding on the Ukraine border?
President Putin wrote his article last July before the Afghanistan withdrawal, so I think that is the biggest symbol of what his ambitions were. But it is absolutely the case that people who don't agree with our values sniff lack of resolve and take action. That's why we have to be resolved.
Margaret Clarion.
Madam Deputy Speaker, what assessment has the government made of the threat against vulnerable minorities in the Ukraine, such as religious or ethnic minorities or members of the LGBTQ plus community? What discussions has the government had with international allies about preventing widespread human rights abuses in the event of an invasion?
In the event of an invasion, it doesn't matter whether you're a minority or a majority. The Russian government's attitude to those people that disagree with them, either at home or in another country, is woeful and dangerous.
Peter Byrne.
Speaker, with the Russian
supporting Ukraine on all fronts.
Their claims
Today
were
we have
becoming
adopted
bigger and bigger, so they had
formally
no problem
the decision
to influence
proposed by
the
the
weak
Commission
power that was
and provide 1.2
weakened by the
billion
virus of
euros
corruption.
in macrofinancial
And they were
assistance to
replacing
Ukraine.
cultural,
We have
economic,
also decided
social
to provide
interests
support
of the
to the
people,
Ukrainian army
actual sovereignty of
with an Ukrainian
Ukraine
professional
by
military
stipulations
education
on nationalist ground.
developed on the European
Stable
Peace Facility.
statehood hasn't been built in
And we
Ukraine.
will increase our support
And
against
political,
cyber attacks
electoral procedures
and countering
serve just as a
disinformation.
screen
We will send a mission of
to
experts
divide power
to
and assets
help
between
Ukraine to
oligarchs'
face
clans.
cyber
Corruption
attacks.
that is a problem to a lot of countries,
We
including
have
Russia.
been also looking at
In
the
Ukraine,
possibility of
$1 million per day.
it will be soon 8
And
years
additionally,
since Russia
large amounts of
invaded
money
and
were transferred
illegally
to the private accounts
annexed
of the leaders
Crimea.
of oppositions.
And
Opposition
I want to
we
repeat
are
once
talking
again
about
that any
tens of
further
millions
agressions
of
against
dollars.
Ukraine
And how
will
much
have
did those who
a strong
really
answer from the European Union.
suffered, those who died
But I want
during
to
the
add
clashes at the
that
squares
this
and
will
streets of the
also
Kyiv gap?
apply to
You better
Belarus.
not know. You better not ask.
Should an
Radicals
attack
who
be
captured
conducted
the
from
power,
its territory
they started
or with
terror
its
against
involvement?
against
Belarus
those
is being
who are
dragged
supporting
into the
constitutional
crisis.
law.
It is
Against
losing its
journalists, against
sovereignty
politicians, they were
with the
humiliated
non-transparent
publicly.
deployment of Russian forces. Belarus
whole
is
range
losing
of
their nuclear neutrality.
Large-scale criminal
It's in a
cases
process of
covered Ukraine.
satelization with
We cannot
respect
but
to
shudder
Russia.
when we remember about the situation in
Now it's
Odessa
up to
when
Russia,
people were burned alive
to the Russian
when they
leadership,
protested
to decide how they want to be seen
authorities. And
by the
those
international
criminals who
community
these days they are
and by
not
history.
punished. No one is even looking for them. But we know their names and we will do everything to punish them.
On
To
Bosnia and
find them
Herzegovina,
and to bring
we
them
discuss
to
about how to preserve
Maidan
the
didn't
sovereignty, the
bring
territorial
Ukraine closer
integrity,
to
and the
democracy.
unity of the
After
country.
perpetrating coup d'etat,
We have
nationalists
urged
and those
political
forces
leaders
that
to take
backed them
responsibility to preserve the constitution, ensure
brought the situation
full return to
the
state
deadlock.
institutions,
They pushed
and deal
Ukraine
with
into
open
the
issues.
chasm of civil
There is
war.
no place in
And seaports of Ukraine. And Ukraine doesn't have independent court system anymore. The Kyiv authorities gave the preferential right to choose the members of the Supreme Legislation Court bodies. And via its embassy in the U.S., the embassy of the U.S. directly controls the National Agency on Preventing Corruption, National Anti-Corruption Bureau, Specialized Anti-Corruption District Attorney Office, and Anti-Corruption Court. It's all done under the pretense to increase the efficiency of fighting corruption. Well, okay then, but where are the results? Because corruption is still there. It's even worse than it was. Do Ukrainians know about these choices? Do they understand that their country...
Could you please explain what this means in practical terms? Are you implying that, for instance, the sanctions package that has been prepared could be triggered by such a move? And if not, which other tools does the European Union have to deter such a move? Thank you.
They are adopting more and more discriminatory decrees.
That's it.
Now they have a law.
That's it. I was thinking in Spanish, but they let me go to English. That's it. Certainly, if there is annexation, it will be sanctions.
According to the laws on education
and if there is a recognition, I will put the sanctions on the table, and the ministers will decide. Keep in mind which is the process of sanctions. According with the treaty, sanctions are being approved by the Foreign Affairs Ministers' Council by unanimity under the proposal of the High Representative. So it's my responsibility, and I will certainly put on the table the sanctions package that has been prepared if such a thing happens.
Individuals and legal entities.
Next one we take colleagues connected remotely. Ricard Jozwiak, Radio Free Europe. Ricard, your microphone should be open any moment now. You can go ahead.
Yes, Mr. High Representative, I hope you hear me. If you mentioned Belarus as well, are you ready to push for the sixth sanctions package to be adopted ahead of the next FAC if this militarization of the country continues? Thank you very much.
The split in church in Kyiv, they cynically turned into an instrument of national policy. The current leadership of the country does not react to the request of the people to
if there is a participation of the Belarus territory or institutions, certainly yes. If there is a Russian aggression that takes place from the Belarusian soil, with the agreement, participation and commitment of the Belarus, certainly Belarus will have to be sanctioned.
Ukrainian authorities have nothing to say against this. That's why they place their bets on aggression. They use cells of extremists, including the radical Islamic
Yuri Shekodich, the High Representative, you just said that should Russia recognize these two separatist republics, you will put sanctions on the table. Does it mean that you will put the prepared package of sanctions that you said today yourself that the work on this package has been finished? Will you put this package on the table, and will you also convene an extraordinary Foreign Affairs Council for that? Or maybe will there be an extraordinary summit of the EU? And the second question, today, Ukrainian Minister Dmytro Kuleba has said that the best signal to Putin would be to provide Ukraine with the perspective of the EU membership. I know, of course, how different EU member states have different views on this matter, but can you tell us, was there a discussion on this point, and maybe, or if not, then do you plan to initiate a discussion of this issue? Thank you very much.
Well, I understand very well that for Ukraine, not from now, since ever, since independence, European perspective,
nuclear technology
hasn't been a beacon.
To deliver such weapons back from the Soviet time.
As it was from my country, Spain, at the end of the dictatorship.
Also designed in the Soviet Union.
And it's clear that Ukraine has a European perspective.
It's a matter of time.
And
they
we
still
are
have this technology from the
helping
Soviet times.
Ukraine
So getting
to develop reforms.
weapon will be much easier for Ukraine.
We've been listening to the very latest there from the EU talk about these tensions and really just being put out moments ago in Russian was Vladimir Putin speaking to his people there as these tensions continue to mount there between Russia and Ukraine, as the Kremlin earlier said in a statement that Russian President Vladimir Putin in the near future will want to recognize the independence of several areas in eastern Ukraine, saying that today the leadership of the DPR and LPR received appeals to recognize suffers. The Kremlin statement read, repeating claims of military aggression that Ukraine has repeatedly denied and disputed. With all this in mind, the president of Russia said that he intended to sign a corresponding decree in the near future. The statement read, adding that the president of France and the federal chancellor of Germany expressed their disappointment with this development. Earlier today, Vladimir Putin also informed the leaders of France and Germany that he would recognize the independence there of those regions in Ukraine, as Russian state media reported there. Putin also said that Ukraine has always been a part of Russia. Now, earlier today, amid fears of a Russian invasion of Ukraine, tensions have spiked in the country's east, where Ukrainian forces are locked in a long conflict with Russia-backed separatists. More than 14,000 people have been killed in nearly 8 years of fighting, and a sharp increase in skirmishes in recent days have raised concerns that Moscow could use the situation as a pretext for an invasion. World leaders are making another diplomatic push in hopes of preventing a Russian invasion of Ukraine, despite growing tensions, even as the Kremlin considers recognizing the independence of the two separatist regions in eastern Ukraine, and shelling continues in those areas. So we will continue to follow this for you really at every step right here on Live Now from Fox, as we wait for more of a detailed readout of what Vladimir Putin just said in that Russian TV address. We will be monitoring that for you, and then also hoping maybe a translation will happen at some point, and we'll be able to play that out for you in full right here on Live Now from Fox. We're also monitoring right now at this hour. There could be a possible Ukraine Security Council meeting that could be coming up, and we'll be featuring that for you if it happens right here on Live Now from Fox. But just to reiterate, if you're just joining us here on Live Now from Fox, we appreciate you as we try to give you the most worldwide coverage right here, as these tensions have, it seems like every day a new idea and a new situation arises here when we're talking about Russia, Ukraine here. As just moments ago, the Russian President Vladimir Putin said he would decide whether to recognize the independence of separatist regions in eastern Ukraine. That is what he wants to do right now, as he's saying that he wants to declare independence for those two parts of Ukraine. Now, that would basically give, if that were to happen, Russia about 13% more land in Ukraine there. We'll be keeping an eye on that. I want to provide you this right here from this tweet just moments ago, saying Russia has made and is making efforts to resolve all matters peacefully The Security Council held a meeting at the Kremlin. That was earlier today. We'll get you more of a readout of what happened there in just moments, but I wanted to give that to your attention right here on Live Now from Fox as we continue to provide you always the very, very latest that is happening here in this breaking news mode here with Russia tensions continuing to mount in eastern Ukraine right now. Amid fears of a Russia invasion of Ukraine, tensions have spiked in the country's east, where Ukrainian forces are locked in a long conflict with Russia-backed separatists. More than 14,000 people have been killed in nearly 8 years of fighting, and a sharp increase in skirmishes in recent days have raised the concerns that Moscow can use this situation as a pretext for an incursion. Just yesterday, Russia rescinded earlier pledges to pull tens of thousands of its troops back from Ukraine's northern border, a move that U.S. leaders said put Russia at another step closer to what they said was the planned invasion of Ukraine. Just today, we learned that some forces in the Russian military are just about 3 miles from the Ukraine border as it continues to get closer and closer to a possible invasion. The Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky facing a sharp spike in violence in and around territory held by Russia-backed rebels and increasingly dire warnings that Russia plans to invade, called for Russian President Vladimir Putin to meet him and seek resolution here to this crisis. Just yesterday, we learned that President Biden wants to meet with Putin if, in fact, Russia does not invade. This could be a last-ditch effort on the U.S. side of diplomacy to try to get Russia and Ukraine in order. So, if you're just joining us here, everyone, on Live Now from Fox, we appreciate you joining us here as we are continuing to wait for more of a readout from this address that Putin just did moments ago, and we played out some of that here for you on Live Now from Fox, but we're hoping to get a translation soon, and we'll play that for you right here on Live Now from Fox, everyone.
США продавили решение о том, что Украина и, кстати, Грузия станут членами НАТО. Многие их европейские союзники США уже тогда прекрасно понимали все риски подобной перспективы.
Everything we believe in, and it has been framing our lives, international rules, principle and progress achieved since the end of the Cold War, all that is being challenged. And we have condemned the Russian military build-up close to Ukraine, the increased ceasefire violations and provocations from the Russia-backed separatists in eastern Ukraine. We have also condemned actions, staged events, and information manipulation that are clearly aimed at creating a pretext for military escalations against Ukraine. It's a classical way of behaving. You create pretext for military escalations. We commend Ukraine for its restraint in face of this intimidation and violations of Minsk agreement and international law. We have at the meantime, while we were discussing inside the Council meeting, we were following the discussions of the Russian Security Council with a strong concern. We understand that the final decision has not been taken yet, and we call upon President Putin to respect international law and the Minsk agreements, and expect him not to recognize the independence of Luhansk and Donetsk Oblast. And we are ready to react with a strong, united front in case he should decide to do so. We expect that he will not, but if he does, we will react with a strong and united front. Today we have had Foreign Minister Kuleba And we have reaffirmed our unity, our resolve and solidarity with Ukraine, because the Ukrainian security is our security. And we will continue supporting Ukraine on all fronts. Today we have adopted formally the decision proposed by the Commission and provide 1.2 billion euros in macro-financial assistance to Ukraine. We have also decided to provide support to the Ukrainian army with an Ukrainian professional military education developed on the European Peace Facility. And we will increase our support against cyber attacks and countering disinformation. We will send a mission of experts to help Ukraine to face cyber attacks. We have been also looking on the possibility of a joint session of the Foreign Affairs Council with Ukrainian partners in Kyiv. I want to confirm that our embassies and diplomatic missions remain open and fully operational, with the single exception of one country. All others remain at Kyiv. Their embassies are there, open and operational, 26 plus the European Union delegation. It will be soon 8 years since Russia invaded and illegally annexed Crimea. And I want to repeat once again that any further aggressions against Ukraine will have a strong answer from the European Union. But I want to add that this will also apply to Belarus. Should an attack be conducted from its territory or with its involvement, Belarus is being dragged into the crisis, is losing its sovereignty with the non-transparent deployment of Russian forces. Belarus is losing their nuclear neutrality. It's in a process of satellization with respect to Russia. Now it's up to Russia, to the Russian leadership, to decide how they want to be seen by the international community and by history. On Bosnia and Herzegovina, we discussed about how to preserve the sovereignty, the territorial integrity and the unity of the country. We have urged political leaders to take responsibility to preserve the constitution, ensure full return to state institutions, and it will open issues. There is no place in Europe for a divided Bosnia and Herzegovina, and those who work in this direction are strongly wrong. They are depriving their people of a prosperous European perspective on life. The ministers expressed their full support to the European Union Special Representative, the European Union Force Althea, and to the High Representative Smith, and to the efforts of facilitation that we are deploying from the External Action Service under my direction and from the US Special Representative. Both are trying to facilitate the political dialogue in order to reach an agreement on the electoral reform, on the constitutional reform, including limited constitutional amendments that are improving, that could improve the functionality of the Federation. We are ready to use all the instruments available if the situation will require. This certainly includes financial assistance and restrictive measures, but this will be used as the last resort, and certainly we would prefer the dialogue and the agreement between parties in order to ensure the reforms needed to develop the elections, the forthcoming elections. We discussed about climate diplomacy. We had the Joint Ministerial Council with the Gulf Council cooperation. This is a key moment for the resumption of our high-level engagement. 6 years without a meeting with the Gulf. It's time to recover our reach out with these countries. We are the biggest investor in the Gulf. We are the second trade partner. But our political reach out, our political engagement is not high enough. So we committed to work closely on green transition, to work closer together on development cooperation and humanitarian action. We discussed a lot about the situation in Yemen, and we issued a joint statement from the two presidencies and approved a 5-year joint cooperation program, which includes initiative on transition and change, climate change, on trade, investment, education and research, and people-to-people contacts. This was the easy and nice part of the meeting. It was a pleasure to receive here the 6 members of the Gulf Association Council, Cooperation Council, and to discuss with them our future engagement and cooperation. This was, as I said, the easy part. The more difficult part was certainly to discuss about Bosnia-Herzegovina situation and the Ukrainian situation. We also discussed about Mali and current affairs, but we are waiting for some information that we should get on the next days in order to take decisions on the next Foreign Affairs Council about our military missions in Mali. And that being said, Peter, I remain at your disposal.
So we go to the questions, and we will take the combination of questions from you here in the press room, but also from the colleagues who are connected remotely. The first one I spotted was Thomas Gutschker, Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung. We have a microphone over there.
High Representative, when you say that we are ready to take or to show a strong and united front against a recognition of the so-called People's Republics, I'm here. Can you see me? Here. Yes. When you say we are ready to show a strong and united front, could you please explain what this means in practical terms? Are you implying that, for instance, the sanctions package that has been prepared could be triggered by such a move? And if not, which other tools does the European Union have to deter such a move? Thank you.
Es eso. That's it. That's it. That's it. I was thinking in Spanish, but let me go to English. That's it. Certainly, if there is annexation, it will be sanctions.
Okay.
And if there is a recognition, I will put the sanctions on the table, and the ministers will decide. Keep in mind which is the process of sanctions. According with the treaty, sanctions are being approved by the Foreign Affairs Ministers' Council by unanimity under the proposal of the High Representative. So it's my responsibility, and I will certainly put on the table the sanctions package that has been prepared if such a thing happens.
Okay, next one we take colleagues connected remotely. Richard Joswiak, Radio Free Europe. Richard, your microphone should be open any moment now. You can go ahead.
Yes, Mr. High Representative, I hope you hear me. If you mentioned Belarus as well, are you ready to push for the 6th sanctions package to be adopted ahead of the next FAC if this militarization of the country continues? Thank you very much.
If Belarus is part of the aggression, if there is the participation of the Belarus territory or institutions, certainly yes. If there is a Russian aggression that takes place from the Belarusian soil, with the agreement, participation and commitment of the Belarus, certainly Belarus will have to be sanctioned in equal step than Russia.
Okay, thank you. Next question, Yuri. Go ahead.
Yuri Shiko, Deutsche Welle. High Representative, you just said that should Russia recognize these two separatist republics, you will put sanctions on the table. Does it mean that you will put the prepared package of sanctions that you said today yourself that the work on this package has been finished? Will you put this package on the table, and will you also convene an extraordinary Foreign Affairs Council for that? Or maybe will there be an extraordinary summit of the EU? And the second question, today, Ukrainian Minister Dmytro Kuleba has said that the best signal to Putin would be to provide Ukraine with the perspective of the EU membership. I know, of course, how different EU member states have different views on this matter, but can you tell us, was there a discussion on this point, and maybe, or if not, then do you plan to initiate a discussion of this issue? Thank you very much.
Well, I understand very well that for Ukraine, not from now, since ever, since independence, the European perspective has been a beacon, as it was for my country, Spain, at the end of the dictatorship. And it's clear that Ukraine has a European perspective, and we are helping Ukraine to develop reforms in order to approach this perspective. And this is maybe what is the problem with Russia. Ukraine is not a military threat to Russia. Come on. But a fully democratic Ukraine, a prosperous Ukraine, a country which the standards of freedom and prosperity of the European Union, this is a mirror that represents a danger for the Russian political system. And certainly we want a fully democratic and prosperous Ukraine on a way to the European perspective. It doesn't mean that tomorrow we are going to propose European membership, but certainly we want to help Ukraine to be a like-minded country with the same kind of political democratic systems, free market economy that we have.
And on sanctions? And on sanctions, will you put this prepared package?
Look, we have a package prepared. This package has certain components that can be implemented with certain degrees, depending on the level of the aggression.
In case of recognition.
Can I speak? You are kind enough. Thank you. So this package is, I'm not going to invent the package by myself. I'm going to present the proposal that has been built, working, the External Action Service and the Commission, which has played a very important role in preparing this package. And this is what will be presented to the ministers, which has the political, the institutionally, it's the Council who takes the decision. You're asking if the European Council could also intervene. Maybe. I am not chairing the European Council. But the European Council is the highest political authority in the European Union. It provides political guidance, but it doesn't take decision. And the Council takes decision under the guidance of the European Council.
Okay, thank you. We go to a question from Lorna Cook from AP. Lorna, your microphone is open already.
Thank you, High Representative. Lorne Cook, The Associated Press. A quick question on Ukraine. I believe there is some support for a Foreign Affairs Council to be held in Kiev. Do you sense a majority for that? Is that something you would support? And if I could ask additionally, why is the EU training mission still going on in Mali when the army's already been involved in 2 coups and the soldiers you're training may be working with the Wagner Group?
Nobody talks about sending missions to Mali. Our missions are already in Mali. Our missions are there, and they have been there for many years. And the question is, should they continue? It will depend. It will depend on the conditions that the junta can offer us about the operation and what we are doing there, how the soldiers are going to be working with or without, in cooperation or without cooperation with the Russian mercenaries. Certainly, if they have to work in cooperation with the Russian mercenaries, no. By the time being, the missions are there. I am not saying anything about sending missions. The question is, should we continue? Should we leave? Or should we, as we have done in Central African Republic, to remain by frozen our activities by the time being? Everything has to be done according with the conditions that the junta will offer us, and this is being discussed by a mission. But not maybe the confusion is, I said I'm sending a mission. It was not a military mission. The mission is my Secretary General in charge of military missions, together with a technical staff, is the one who I sent to Mali, but this is not a military mission. It's to discuss about the military missions who are already out there.
And the FAC in Kiev? You also asked about the FAC, possible FAC in Kiev, whether there is a majority.
Oh yes, it's a possibility. It's a possibility, but the circumstances maybe will be much. The possibilities about holding a meeting of the Foreign Affairs Council in Kiev. Yes, why not? But it will depend on the circumstances. The circumstances right now, they were quite different from at the beginning of the meeting at 9 o'clock in the morning. At 9 o'clock in the morning, we were still thinking on holding high-level meetings between President Putin and President Biden, other formats, more people at high-level diplomatic activities. At the end of the day, the scenario is completely different because we are no longer talking about summits, but decision taken maybe could be taken by President Putin about recognition, independence of this oblast, this part of the Ukrainian territory. We are in a completely different scenario.
Thank you, and we take one last question because High Representative has to run for a train connection, so please go ahead.
Britta Hilbert, ZDF, German TV. You were, High Representative, you were stressing the need for unanimity in the Council to decide on sanctions. In view of this unanimity, to what extent do you think other important issues, fundamental issues to the EU, have to step down in importance, as, for example, the ruling of the European Court of Justice on Poland and Hungary's state of the rule of law?
No veo la relación. Disculpe, sorry, I haven't understood your question. I don't see the relationship between this sentence about the rule of law in Poland and what we are talking on the Ukrainian crisis, which we'd better say Russian crisis, but I don't see the report.
I'm quite happy. You need unanimity, you said. There is countries in the EU Council who are not only of different opinion on Russia maybe, but also on what the fundamental values of the EU are. and to ensure unanimity, I wonder to what extent it is necessary now to put these subjects aside.
I still don't see the report because unanimity on the issue of Ukraine is guaranteed. Everybody agrees. There is no need to talk about other questions that are not related with.
So the EU will proceed on these matters?
As I said, we will put the proposal on the table and the member states will decide by unanimity. But until now, there is a clear and a strong unity about it.
Okay, thank you very much, High Representative. Colleagues, thank you very much, and sorry, we really have to run, so thank you for staying and have a nice evening. Bye.
So once again, you've been listening in to members of the European Union coming together, talking about possible Russian threats here. But just coming into the newsroom, we were showing you some of the visuals of President Vladimir Putin out in Russia there as he made a speech as the world braces for potential war in Ukraine. It was all in Russian, so we couldn't air it for you live here, but we are getting a statement from the Kremlin saying Putin in the near future will recognize the independence of the Donetsk People's Republic and Luhansk People's Republic regions in eastern Ukraine. The statement saying in part, today the leadership of the DPR and LPR received appeals to recognize their sovereignty in connection with the military aggression of the Ukrainian authorities, massive shelling of the territory of Donbass, and as a result of which the civilian population suffers. This is all part of that statement from the Kremlin. Again, repeating claims of military aggression that Ukraine has repeatedly denied and disputed. The statement going on to say, with all this in mind, the president of Russia and said that he intended to sign a corresponding decree in the near future. Going on to say the president of France and the federal chancellor of Germany expressed their disappointment with this development. This as President Biden and Putin have agreed to the principle to meet for a summit discussing security and strategic stability in Europe. But this, of course, will only take place if Russia does not invade Ukraine. And that was pushed forth yesterday by a statement from Press Secretary Jen Psaki at the White House. The U.S. State Department also warning Americans in Ukraine that there's a strong likelihood that any Russian military operations would severely restrict commercial air travel. We've heard that from the White House in the past, telling any Americans to get out of the Ukraine if they can, as quickly as they can. A U.S. official also warning the United Nations that Russia has compiled a list of Ukrainians to be killed or sent to camps following a military occupation. So this is substantial right now. And coming up after the break, we'll show you some new video that we're getting in of evacuations underway from residents in separatist-controlled regions in eastern Ukraine that are now arriving in Russia, as there's been quite a bit of finger-pointing between Ukraine and Russia on who is the aggressor and who is not. So we'll show you some of that after we come back here on Live Now from Fox. We are tracking all the developments here. If we also get that readout in English from President Putin, we'll play it out for you in full, as we always do, live, raw, and unfiltered. See you back here in 2 minutes. Welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Daytona Everett from our Phoenix, Arizona studio. Almost 1 o'clock here in Phoenix, almost 3 o'clock out on the East Coast. We're getting new video into the newsroom right now. Evacuees from separatist-controlled regions in eastern Ukraine arriving in Russia. You're seeing video right there. Russian state TV showing humanitarian aid for evacuees being packed and shipped to several regions in Moscow. The boxes containing hygiene products, food, heaters, and personal protective equipment, including masks as well. Residents have been arriving at a temporary accommodation center in the Rostov region. Russian news agencies said 10,000 evacuees have arrived in Russia. Kyiv and Western leaders say the mobilization, evacuation, and increased shelling are all a part of a Russian plan to create a pretext for a Russian invasion. Meanwhile, a new round of talks between President Biden and Russian President Vladimir Putin could happen as long as Russia doesn't move ahead with an invasion of Ukraine. Fox's Madeline Rivera in Washington with the latest developments and why many are skeptical of a potential meeting between these two leaders.
Heavy shelling from Russian-backed separatists in eastern Ukraine is ramping up per Ukrainian military officials, stoking fears that a Russian invasion could happen anytime.
It's worse than 2014. They were fighting less, and now they hit us every day.
But in another attempt at diplomacy, President Biden has signaled he's open to meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin if Russia hasn't attacked yet. Still, the Kremlin remains cautious.
A meeting is possible if it's deemed beneficial by the heads of state.
Russian tanks and troops remain in Belarus, despite military drills that were supposed to end over the weekend. The U.S. also issuing a new warning, citing credible information that indicates Russian forces are creating lists of identified Ukrainians to be killed or sent to camps following a military occupation.
We're absolutely prepared to sit down and seriously discuss with Mr. Putin a diplomatic way forward here.
Ukraine, meanwhile, making a dire plea for tougher action from Western leaders. President Vladimir Zelensky calling for sanctions against Russia before any potential invasion, not after, a notion some congressional lawmakers agree with.
We need to tell Vladimir Putin exactly what we're going to do if we want to have any effect on his calculus whatsoever.
The White House argues the threat of sanctions should deter Putin from attacking. But some are questioning that argument, especially if the U.S. believes Putin has already made up his mind to invade. In Washington, Madeline Rivera, Fox News.
And this is the latest tweet that we're getting from the Kremlin there, saying Russia has made and is making efforts to resolve all matters peacefully. This is President Putin at a Security Council meeting. And also, we just reported to you and now are getting video of the Kremlin confirming that Putin is recognizing the independence of Ukraine breakaway regions. I read in part to you a statement from the Kremlin saying today the leadership of the DPR and LPR received appeals to recognize their sovereignty in connection with the military aggression of the Ukrainian authorities, massive shelling of the territory of Donbas, as a result of which the civilian population suffers. This is a repeated claim of military aggression that we've been saying Ukraine has repeatedly denied and disputed. The statement from Kremlin saying, with all this in mind, the president of Russia has said that he intended to sign a corresponding decree in the near future. And now this video showing President Putin signing that decree right there. So that is the latest development when it comes to the aggressions between Ukraine and between Russia. And of course, the United States getting caught up in the middle of it, as now even congressmen and women in the United States are saying they want to be a part of this. They want to be a part of the conversation on what next steps the Biden administration will take. We also heard from Vice President Kamala Harris yesterday as she is saying diplomacy is still on the table. We're going to play out those remarks for you right here.
Well, this was an important trip to be here at the Munich Security Conference, in particular this year, as I said yesterday. We are looking at a moment that is a very decisive moment on one of the bases for the Munich Security Conference, and certainly one of the founding reasons for NATO, which is European security and the connection and alliance between Europe and the United States. This was a productive trip in terms of the extensive bilateral meetings that we had that were in furtherance of the ongoing collaboration and partnership with our allies. It was important in that, as you all know, this is a moment that is very dynamic, if not every hour, certainly every day. There seem to be new moments of interest and also of intelligence. And so we have affirmed, however, all of that being said, through these last couple of days, that this alliance is strong, probably stronger than it was before. And that this alliance has purpose and meaning, founded on shared principles that are very much at play right now. As I mentioned yesterday, if we think about those principles, one of the most important is about a mutual respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity, which at its essence is what is at play in terms of Russia's posture as it relates to Ukraine. At stake is the NATO alliance in terms of our unity, joining together through sometimes compromise, certainly always through collaboration, to be a unified voice, especially when these very founding principles of our relationship are being compromised, if not attacked. So with that, I'll take any questions.
And I'll call on folks. So Nandita from Reuters.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. During your meeting with President Zelensky, he spoke a little bit about asking the U.S. for specific defense aid. Could you talk a little bit about what he asked the United States for and what the U.S. has agreed to offer?
Sure. Well, I'll tell you what I think you already know. So far, we have offered, and not even offered, we have transferred and given $650 million in aid. We have also made certain loan guarantees, around in particular $1 billion. And that is on top of all of the work that we have done collectively through the NATO alliance to provide support for Ukraine.
Is there anything new that you are planning to offer Ukraine?
Well, what I made clear in our meeting is that, again, this is a dynamic situation. And depending on what happens in the coming days, we will reevaluate the need that Ukraine has and our ability to support. And we have been doing that through the course of these many months.
Let's go to Molly from ABC.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. I wanted to ask you first, are you going to take part in that NSC meeting
yes.
today? You
yes.
are going to take part in that?
Yes.
And then I wanted to follow up on your meeting with President Zelensky yesterday.
Okay.
When he spoke after your meeting, he shared his frustration with countries like the U.S. who say that an attack is likely to happen in Ukraine, but that you won't put sanctions in place until that happens. The administration has continually said that retaining those sanctions holds on to some leverage. But if you believe Putin has made up his mind, what leverage do you really have? Why not put those sanctions in place now?
The purpose of the sanctions has always been and continues to be deterrence. But let's also recognize the unique nature of the sanctions that we have outlined. These are some of the greatest sanctions, if not the strongest, that we've ever issued. As I articulated yesterday, it is directed at institutions, in particular financial institutions and individuals, and it will exact absolute harm for the Russian economy and their government.
But if Putin has made up his mind, do you feel that this threat that has been looming is really going to deter him?
Absolutely. We strongly believe, and remember also that the sanctions are a product not only of our perspective as the United States, but a shared perspective among our allies. And the allied relationship is such that we have agreed that the deterrence effect of these sanctions is still a meaningful one, especially because, remember also, we still sincerely hope that there is a diplomatic path out of this moment. And within the context then of the fact that that window is still open, although it is absolutely narrowing, but within the context of a diplomatic path still being open, the deterrence effect, we believe, has merit.
Let's go to Jennifer Jacobs from Bloomberg.
Thank you. Would you be willing to talk a little bit about how the U.S. would get out of this potential conflict with Russia? What is the end game? How does the U.S., after imposing some of these sanctions and possible military action, how does the U.S. disentangle from this?
I would characterize it differently. We don't consider ourselves to be entangled, but we're very clear of our principles and our purpose, which is to be aligned with our allies, understanding that, I mean, listen, guys, we're talking about the potential for war in Europe. I mean, let's really take a moment to understand the significance of what we're talking about. It's been over 70 years. And through those 70 years, as I mentioned yesterday, there has been peace and security. We are talking about the real possibility of war in Europe. So our position is for us very clear, which is as a leader, which we have been, bringing together the allies, working together around our collective and unified position, that we would all, not just prefer, we desire, we believe, it is in the best interest of all that there is a diplomatic end to this moment. And so where do we want this to end? That is where we want it to end.
What should Americans be braced for? What could they possibly be facing? The president has already said Americans will be facing some economic fallout or some hardships. Can you explain to Americans what exactly will they face if this happens?
Sure. As the president talked about in his speech, we are aware that, again, when America stands for her principles and all of the things that we hold dear, it requires sometimes for us to put ourselves out there in a way that maybe we will incur some cost. And in this situation, that may relate to energy costs, for example. But we are taking very specific and appropriate, I believe, steps to mitigate what that cost might be if it happens.
Let's go to Eli at the Los Angeles Times.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. The question about something else that President Zelensky said yesterday relating to NATO. He seemed to question the sincerity of allies, including the U.S., I think, in terms of a desire to admit Ukraine to NATO. Is there any reaction to those pretty pointed comments from the president? And was that something that was discussed with Chancellor Scholz and other leaders?
Let me start by saying I appreciate and admire President Zelensky's desire to join NATO. And one of, again, the founding principles of NATO is that each country must have the ability, unimpaired, unimpeded, to determine their own future, both in terms of their form of government and, in this case, whether they desire to be a member of NATO. And I'll put that in context because the obvious is also the point, which is that, and therefore no other country can tell anyone whether they should or should not join NATO. That should be their independent choice. That is the point of sovereignty. So I respect President Zelensky's desire to be a member of NATO. NATO is a membership. It is about nations coming together as a group, making decisions collectively around, again, principles, and what will be then the conditions and the standards of membership. And so that is the process. It doesn't happen overnight. No one country can say, I want to be, and therefore I will be. And no one country can say, you can't be. And isn't that at the heart of the very issue we're presented with in terms of Russia's aggression or stated aggression toward Ukraine?
Was it surprising to you, though, that he planted that flag so firmly on that issue, given that that's obviously Putin's main demand is that he get some sort of guarantee swearing that Ukraine won't be admitted, and that Zelensky wants to make it clear that they do want into the organization. Is that a surprise that he would come and say that at this point in this crisis, and does that make it less likely that there'll be some sort of diplomatic resolution?
I'm not going to second guess President Zelensky's desires for his own country. But I will
Vice President. I'm wondering